What's going on, Dolphins? It is your boy Dillon, and I am back for yet another one today. Because you know me, man, whenever I feel compelled to make a video, I'll make a video. And so I'm actually making this one. It's going to be a response to a comment that I actually was just left on my last video. And I'm doing it because, one, I like to, make videos responding to your questions and comments, specifically make videos about that, and give you guys shout outs, etc. But also, I like to do it when there's, a good conversation and a good point brought up. And so here I am, right? And so this is a comment that was on my last video. Landon McVeigh wrote this comment, and so what he says is that he thinks that we should draft Tua, right, or any other quarterback, but they won't start. They shouldn't start, right? Fitzpatrick should start, and that quarterback should, essentially ride the bench, redshirt, right, and learn behind Fitzpatrick. But he is an advocate for taking Tua, right? That's the one area where obviously I disagree a little bit. I think he's way too much of an injury, unless maybe he drops to the third round. But even then, personally, I wouldn't be comfortable with it. I'm honestly okay with somebody else taking him. Like, a lot of people bring up the Drew Brees situation, and sure, the Dolphins were foolish for not taking him, and certainly over the shoulder injury. But his injury, Drew Brees' injury history, wasn't nearly as bad as Tua's is, right? And it's one thing to have, a shoulder injury. I know it was, relatively severe. A lot of people were concerned about it, et cetera, but that's one thing over having surgery on both of your ankles and your hip after having it break through the back end of the joint, right? Those are way two different injury histories. And now, to be fair, they are both they are both undersized quarterbacks, but Drew Brees has, throughout his career proven to be overall more durable than Tua has in his college career. So what's going to happen when he comes to the NFL? So I wouldn't take him anyway, but maybe, I would consider it if he did drop to the third round or later. But definitely not in the first or second. But as you guys know, I always advocate for taking a quarterback every single year, and I would certainly take one in the third round this year, right? And so, especially considering the fact that you have Ryan Fitzpatrick, you just signed Jake Rudock to a futures contract, and you have Josh Rosen as well on the roster. I don't think he's going to end up being the answer here. I'll get into that a little bit more in a second, but you have those guys on the roster. So just draft a guy. And again, if you want to bring in like an undrafted free agent as well, I think that would be smart. And then you can use certainly all of your higher draft picks where you expect the most talent to be, right, on building the team around him. I know it's not sexy, but build up the trenches, get, like literally fortify that entire offensive line. Am I saying use, your first 5 picks on offensive linemen? No, but certainly use a couple, and I'm talking in the first 3 rounds altogether, right? Certainly use a couple of those picks. Make sure you get a couple defensive linemen, interior and, edge rushers, etc. You need another cornerback. There's plenty of holes, a safety, there's plenty of holes on this roster. Fill those holes, build the team up around him, and then allow that quarterback to sit behind, I personally, again, would rather have Ryan Tannehill as the guy that the young quarterback is learning under. But I do like Ryan Fitzpatrick as a leader and, certainly a fighter and a go-getter, and he's got a lot of good energy, etc., etc. So I do like that. And so I don't hate him being the mentor. Not at all. In fact, I like it. So sit him behind that guy. I totally agree with that. Absolutely. But that's in an ideal world. And unfortunately, we live in this world now in the NFL where there's so much hype on the quarterback position that everybody feels like all you got to do is you just got to get a quarterback high in the draft that's got a ton of talent and that did wonderful, amazing things in college against far lesser competition. And as good as they might be, still far lesser competition, and then just throw them into the fucking fire day one and just see what happens, right? But look, even Patrick Mahomes, right? Because he pointed out, Landon McVeigh pointed out, for example, when Patrick Mahomes was drafted, he only had one start, and that was the last game of the regular season, right? And he was able to sit behind Alex Smith, right? Which was great. That was a wonderful thing. Now, you know, I certainly actually wouldn't hate, like, if we still had Tannehill, I wouldn't actually hate if he sat behind Tannehill for a few years to really develop and really, you know, a lot like, let's say, Jimmy Garoppolo did behind Tom Brady, right? That, to me, would be the smart way. Now, additionally, right, and so in an ideal situation, you do redshirt him and you give him time to come up, adjust to the NFL, figure out how everything works. You don't have to throw him right into the fire in his rookie season, right? Elite or otherwise. And Patrick Mahomes is elite, and he got to sit, and it benefited him greatly. And then he also had a wonderful surrounding cast, a good offensive line, good defense, good playmakers around him. But so ideally, you let him sit on the bench and you learn, right? And like I said, that's part of the reason why I advocate for taking one every year as opposed to taking one high. Not to mention the fact that, you know, players like Tom Brady were picked in later rounds. And really, like, honestly, you can't take a guy and throw him into the fire, possibly confuse him and overwhelm him, right? And then, right, because they talk about trial by fire, et cetera, et cetera. You can't throw him into that situation by, you know, and by doing so, possibly even develop bad habits within that quarterback, like unfortunately Josh Rosen has, right? You see quarterbacks who will get gun shy. They won't take chances, or they'll expect hits that sometimes aren't even there or aren't even coming because they're so used to getting smacked around all the time. Josh Rosen, unfortunately, is experiencing that, right? And no matter how positive he wants to be, you can see it in his play. And that's been in large part because last year he got demolished behind the offensive line that he had in Arizona. And then in the short period of time that he was in this season, same thing happened, right? So that's why, again, Josh Rosen could be a good quarterback, but he needs to be on a team that has something around him. Like, you can't just, and then you can't throw a guy into that situation and then thereby also, you know, possibly stunting his growth and developing bad habits. That's on the coaching staff and the regime when they do shit like that, right? You can't expect that and then do that and then expect them to come out and be great, right? You got to have supporting cast around him. You got to have an offensive line for him, et cetera, right? And so, but then look at Tannehill. They did do that with Tannehill. He was the most sacked quarterback in the league for the first 4 years of his career. But what did he do? He always hung in there tough, right? He was, until the one freak injury, right? Calais Campbell's helmet just happened to hit him in the side of the knee, tore his ACL, right? He was an Iron Man, never missed games. He constantly improved every year. He set rookie records for the Dolphins and had good stats every single year despite being the most sacked quarterback in the league, right? And he's been super mentally tough, not just physically, but mentally tough. Andrew Luck in the same draft class. People say that he's better than Ryan Tannehill. I don't agree. And this is certainly no fault on him, right? And I certainly respect him for bowing out because he couldn't handle it mentally. It's not a slight on him at all. But he's not as mentally tough as Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill has had far worse to deal with. The undue criticism and hate that he's got. The fact that his first coach, Joe Philbin, didn't fucking, have any faith in him at all. The fact that he had to constantly change over head coaches, offensive coordinators, etc. I mean, it's ridiculous, but the dude is a boss. And that's why he's proving it now in Tennessee, where he actually has good shit around him, right? So, I wouldn't waste the draft capital on a guy in the first or second round. Take him later, right? Take somebody in the third. Add that to your mostly young stable of quarterbacks that you have right now. Jake Rudock, Josh Rosen, and then Ryan Fitzpatrick, the veteran leader. Take a dude in the 3rd round and use the rest of that wealth of capital that you have smartly, right? And then in free agency, you also don't have to be super aggressive and overpay guys. You know, you can do it properly and supplement through free agency to help build around what you expect to do in the draft. I think, you know, I know that's a little bit more difficult, because, you know, obviously free agency comes before the draft. So it's hard to sign guys, you know, with, you know, some expectation of what you might do in the draft when you never know what's going to happen in the draft. But you can still be smart about it in free agency and not just, you know, like I said, overpay guys. And then build the rest of the team around him. It doesn't, that because then, you know, you could not, again, I don't particularly advocate for trading up, but you could maybe trade up a couple spots and get Chase Young, and then still have, you know, maybe at least another 1st round pick and get like an offensive lineman. I know people would like flip shit and be like, they'd love Chase Young, but then they'd be like, oh, why are you taking an offensive? Because, man, you got to fortify the trenches. That'll make Fitzpatrick better. That'll make Rosen better. That'll make Ruddock better. That'll make Tua better if they fucking get him, right? Because he needs to have, especially, I mean, you know, if they were to take Tua, I would hope that they would be sitting him for the 1st year and not taking a chance at injuring him. I think if they took Jake Ruddock in the 1st round, Tua in the 1st round and then played him in his 1st season, I think that would just be suicide for his career and for the Dolphins' plans. But, you know, and then you'd be good, man. Then you'd be good, right? So anyway, I just wanted to make that video. I tried to keep it as quick as I can. I think you guys get the idea. So, you know, we'll see, man. I don't really, you know, especially with how, and this is how I'll wrap it, you know, especially with how, you know, cravenly desperate Stephen Ross appears to be from my perspective, based off of his actions and so on and so forth. Look, you know, I don't really have any, and with the way that Chris Greer and Brian Flores have already shown instances of, you know, what I call selling out to him, then, you know, it doesn't really bode well to me, and I don't really have a lot of confidence. I think that he's going to, you know, get them to do, and I hope they prove me wrong. I really do. As I always say, I hope they prove me wrong. But I just feel like he's going to end up doing something where he, you know, he trades up to go get a guy, you know, trades away a bunch of draft capital, or, you know, and then, you know, goes up to get a quarterback, and then they, you know, neglect the offensive line, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, but we'll see, right? So it's still a couple months away. We still have, you know, the rest of this season to finish up with. And again, I hope they prove me wrong. You know, from my perspective, the 1st year was an absolute disaster. And, you know, I mean, but it's crazy because, like, you know, we live in such a topsy-turvy world that people, there are so much of, like, the fan base that were actually, like, rooting for us to be even worse. Like, some people literally wanted us to go 0-16 and have, like, a historically bad season. Like, it's, anyway, it completely mind boggles me. And so it's, like, it's crazy because I look at it, and the entire year was like, people look at the 5 wins and are like, yeah, that's awesome. But again, I pointed out, you know, in Stephen Ross's time here, you know, he took over when we were, you know, still richly rooted in winning, making it to the playoffs, you know, like almost always having a winning record, making it to the playoffs a lot, etc., and winning division titles, going to the AFC championship game, etc., not to mention the few Super Bowls. And then he's just taken us, the trend is just pointed down and down and down, and he's getting older and more desperate. And I think it's a bad mix. And so we'll see what happens. Anyway, that's how I'm gonna wrap it. I hope you guys enjoy my videos and my perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Make sure you share my channel and videos with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. And of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Phins up.